Out of the 14 books I've read so far this year, this is the only one that I've rated 5 stars. Hey my fellow weirdos, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Anna and I read all types of horror, and today I'm going to be reviewing my first 5-star book of the year, and that is The Lamb by Lucy Rose. Now, as soon as this book came out at the end of January, I knew I had to read it immediately, as there has been so much hype over this book so far, over this book's release. This is a debut from the author, and just looking at the way that this book has been marketed, just from that aspect, I was already wanting to pick it up, because have you seen these meat proofs? Actually stunning. And I was begging the publisher to get an ARC of this, which sadly I didn't get, but I did pre-order this. I pre-ordered the signed version from Waterstones. But I also did go to the event in Manchester, so I will get into that later on in the video. Let's just get into what this book is about. So this is a literary horror, and it has folk, gothic, almost like fairy tale elements to it. We follow Margot and her mother as they reside in their homestead in the Cumbrian wilderness. So we follow Margot's point of view in this book, and Margot is an 11 to 12-year-old young girl, and to put it bluntly, her and her mother are cannibals. They collect strays from the forest and from the wilderness. So anybody that comes looking for a bit of shelter after a long walk, or somebody that's like struggling to get a service, for example, because they're in the middle of nowhere, these people come to their house and then they make them feel welcome, they invite them in, and they greet them with a warm fire, a nice warm drink, some entertainment, and then they kill them and eat them. And Margot has pretty much lived her entire life like this. She is used to eating people. She describes how delicious people are, how they make them into pies and recipes. Yeah, it's described in a very heartwarming way, although obviously the nature of what they're doing is not heartwarming at all. It's very sadistic and toxic and insane. But Margot doesn't really know any different from that. And yeah, so Margot and her mother have quite a strange relationship, to say the least. But not only that, the dynamic between both Margot and her mother is quite toxic in general, and Margot doesn't really realise that as a young girl. She's only 11 to 12 years old, and she kind of looks up to her mother. She does what her mama says, but also her mama is not a very nice person, and as the book progresses we kind of get to learn a little bit more about that. And this all starts, the dynamic starts to really be explored between Margot and her mama when a stray, an unusual stray, comes across their homestead one day named Eden. And Eden is unlike the other strays that they've seen before. She kind of seems like she's a kindred spirit somehow, and Margot and her mama decide to not kill Eden, and essentially Eden unknowingly uncovers the cracks in Margot and mama's relationship. Now this is told in the point of view of a child, which I believe is quite a tricky thing to do as a writer, not only as obviously a debut writer. This really worked for me. The prose was kind of told in like a vignette style. It didn't really flow from one chapter to another, and that worked for me because as a child your memory isn't reliable. You're almost retelling certain scenes in your head, and you don't really know the difference between reality and, you know, fiction. And this kind of really works with the setting because the setting is in the Cumbrian wilderness. So we have a lot of woods and a lot of atmosphere to work with. And I think cleverly what Lucy has done here is played the atmosphere and Margot's age together to create this kind of fairy tale-esque writing style. But also within the plot itself, we do get a lot of fairy tales intertwined with this as well, and a lot of stories. Margot herself does go to school, and we get acknowledgements that she has been told these stories. You know, when you're younger and you go to school, you tell tales. You tell ghost tales. So there's that kind of thing intertwined in the text too. And I think the whole thing kind of reads a bit like a fairy tale, like a bit like you don't know if it's true, you don't know what's real, you don't know what's not real, essentially. Therefore, there are going to be elements to this story which don't seem realistic, and I don't think that is the point to this book, that it's realistic. I think for me, the family dynamics and the emotion and the way that cannibalism is used as a metaphor for love, for relationships, that is the heart of this book. So yeah, definitely don't go into this book thinking that you're going to get a fast-paced, action-packed, like realistic account of things, because that's definitely not what this book is. But what this book is a very slow, a very meandering, a very mythical, gory in places, and a toxic relationship uncovered, while also you get a really nice coming of age story. From the beginning of this book, you can tell that something tragic is going to happen. It's almost like you get that sense of dread from the beginning, because, for instance, the first line, let me just read this out to you, because the minute I read this, I was like, right, I'm not putting this book down until I've read it. So the first line, literally, on my 4th birthday, I plucked 6 severed fingers from the shower drain. I mean, and within 20 pages, I was taking so many photos of other lines of this book, because just the way that it is written is just so stunning. It is really that mixture between beautiful prose and disgusting content, and I am so here for that. This is why I love literary horror, because it's taking something so grotesque, it's taking something awful and turning it beautiful. It's that juxtaposition between the two, and that's personally why I love books like this. And I just think as well, some of the descriptions related to like coming of age, so beautiful. Like for instance, this one sentence, Mama touched their knees with her fingers, but when the men saw me closing in from behind Mama, they looked right through me. They wanted Mama's fingers on their skin. That's when I realised that as adults look at children, they don't really see them. They see a body without a mind, something that does what it's told, something that will only understand when it's older. And yeah, I think that's stunning. There's so many quotes that I could take from this book, but honestly, it's definitely one to highlight. And I haven't even got into the character of Mama. The character of Mama is so interesting. This book uses insatiable hunger as a metaphor for filling the void that's inside you, and I think Mama is definitely a representation of that. She's not a very nice person, but she also has feelings and emotions. They're definitely not in the best interests of her daughter. This explores a woman's kind of neglect and real regret for having her daughter. And as a parent, she is really not thinking of Margot, and she's really just striving for that time when, almost before she was a parent, she is very selfish and she just wants to fill her own needs. And yet, as this book goes on and as we learn more about Margot, she definitely learns that Mama is not having her best interests at heart. Thankfully in this book we do get to explore some relationships that aren't that toxic. We get to meet a couple of characters that come into this book. One called Abby, who is Margot's friend, similar age, and then also a bus driver that drives her to school. And we really get to, Margot really gets to discover what it means to have a proper relationship, and this kind of awakens her sense to how toxic her and her mom's relationship is. I'm going to leave it at that because I could literally talk about this book all day. Typically, this is on, I would say, the lighter side of the horror, although there are some graphic moments in this. Obviously the first line's pretty good. It is definitely leaning on sort of like the weird horror, the gothic horror, so don't go into this expecting so many like graphic, horrific elements. But I think for me, what I loved so much about this book is it definitely felt similar to gothic books for me. The focus on one character, the atmosphere, the writing was incredibly visual. So if you go into a book and you can easily visualize things, I think Lucy Rose is definitely a great writer for that. I do believe that she has written some screenplays. Wait, let me check this because I obviously don't want to just be chatting shit. Yeah, so it says Lucy Rose is a Cumbrian writer and filmmaker. Her fiction and non-fiction have been published by Dread Central, and her films have visited BAFTA and Oscar qualifying film festivals internationally. So yeah, she, as a writer, she's definitely always thinking of the visual. Similar books that I could compare this to are kind of like weird, gothic, uncanny. Definitely the works of Shirley Jackson. If you've ever read We Have Always Lived in the Castle, that book, it definitely kind of seems similar to that. It seems similar to Monstrilio, even though I didn't personally love that book. This book to me kind of felt like everything I was wanting Monstrilio to be. Like a young character that's kind of, you know, unusual. Yeah, this, I definitely got a lot more from this book. Also, the yellow wallpaper, it kind of reminded me of that a bit, which is another banger. And yeah, like I say, I went to the book event for this in Manchester, where Lucy Rose and Kat Dunn, who wrote the Carmilla reworking Hungerstone, was there. And yeah, Lucy was really interesting to listen to. Just some of the things that she was saying about this book, about feminist issues, about how she researched this. She basically took stories that she was, because she was brought up in Cumbria, and she used these stories, these bedtime stories, ghost stories almost, and then she incorporated it into this book. And yeah, just some of the research she was doing around baking. She definitely poured her heart and soul into this book, and you can definitely tell. I'm going to leave a few photos of the event as well, because Blackwell's in Manchester did such a good job at hosting this event. We had like finger shortbreads. What more could you want? And yeah, this is definitely one for the weird girls. I love this book, and I'm just going to keep going on about it all the time. If you are interested in any of the things that I've just mentioned, definitely check this out. I personally think it's going to be in so many people's top books of the year, because I already want to read it again, because there's so many quotes that I could just go back and highlight. And I love that in a book, when you've read a book and you almost think that you could read it again and pick up something different. Yeah, I just love it. Let me know if you're going to read this book, or if you have read this book and what you thought. Bad or good, let me know. I'm always open for discussion. Of course, we're not always going to like the same book. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.